Hey, hello, this is Shah from the podcast Thrive Not Survive After Child Abuse with episode 28. Yesterday we talked about, storytelling part 2. It was not planned that way, but it just happened to be that way. Just go back because in the first one I really tell you three stories. All three stories have something to do with a book. The first one with my birthday, the other one is actually to show you how important it is to use stories when you have a message. And the third one is truly about the message that I have to tell. And then in the episode that I posted yesterday, we went deeper into that message that I was telling you about. And that's the message of my best-selling book, Broken Silence. So go back and find out what it is all about, right? Today we're going to talk about, is it seeing before you believe, or can you believe before you see it, right? I mean, there's a lot of things written about it, and we can be all very philosophical about it, but nowadays we hear a lot to say, I don't believe it until I see it. And that has often to do with people who had lived a life, often were hurt in life with, maybe broken promises, things that they were disappointed about. So they start to live by the fact that, they want to see it first before you believe it. But if you go back to your childhood and if you can remember it, there were a lot of things that you just did because you kind of believed it or trusted it, right? So one example that come to mind for me is, when you walk with one of your parents into a dark room, miraculously the light turns on. Now you know that one of your parents just switched the switch on, but when you were a young child, that just happened. You believed that would happen. Also, miraculously, food appeared in front of you. You didn't have to see it first. You just believed that every day would happen. And that took a long time actually before, as a child, you start to realize that someone had to prepare that food and then put it in front of you. Someone had to work for it, pay for the food so that they could buy the food, stuff like that. But so for the longest time, we operated in a life that we believe it first before we see it. And that brings me to a point is, so what is it actually that we see? And if we limit our beliefs, do we actually see also less? Which is probably true, right? Because I wrote a course about it, about having an open mind. But we never see the world as the world is. We typically see the world as we are. That's a saying that I used to say in some of my courses that have something to do with the perception. So, and it's not so complicated as you think. You always see the world through the eyes of how your upbringing was, or how your cultural background is, and the things that you have experienced in life. If you have a lot of good experience in life, you tend to be a little bit more naive, as we would say. If you had a lot of bad experience in life, you tend to see the world a little bit with more fear or more skepticism, right? And you probably recognize that. Now the point is, how open can we then in our judgment, as if we know that it's the case, and if we had enough experience or love in life, then we come to the point that we actually never believe anything until we see it, right? And that's what you keep your life actually relatively small if you think about it, right? And it's not entirely true either, right? It's not entirely true either, because we do still many things in our lives that we have to believe that it is there. So imagine that you're driving in your car, right? And you trust yourself to drive with the headlights on, and you don't see ever beyond the point of your headlights. But you know, or at least you trust, that the road is still there. Does that make sense? You only have to see as far as your headlights goes, and then you can drive a car. And that's a little bit in life as well. That's a very normal way of operating, right? Now you could imagine that the more trust you have in life, you don't need to have you know, your headlights beam so far into the darkness. But I know it. Everyone knows it. If you drive in on a road that is very unfamiliar for you, very unknown, you actually put on your high beams, right? You want to see as far as possible because you really don't trust your instincts, right? You think like, oh, who knows where this? Maybe there's a bend in the road that you don't see, or maybe the road stops altogether, right? Now you could see that the more fear you have, the more you want to see it. And therefore you see sometimes people who have a little bit more fear to drive, they actually literally go and lean forward. Well, if you just follow my podcast, you can see it. But if you see this on Facebook, because I will post this also on Facebook, where you actually can see the camera recording. If you see this on Facebook, you see me leaning forward. You see some typically older people, but also some people who just have their driver's license, right? They lean very much forward as if they could really see more than just sitting and relax in the chair. Now, the more experienced you are as a car driver, the more relaxed you are, and the more you trust, what you are capable of, and also you trust that you actually know how to react in certain situations, right? It's never a guarantee. It's the same as life. It's never a guarantee. You know that if you drive enough on the road, you know that almost daily you have an almost accident. But you trust yourself so well that you know how to react in those situations. And we are luckily not always conscious about it, but we're very well aware that we could be in an accident, right? We could be in an accident every day. Now, I don't want to jinx anything, and not you listening to me or me myself in this kind of thing, because there could also be something happening that you have not foreseen at all. But here's the thing. If you start to think a lot about these things, you probably never get into your car again. So, back in, what was it? Maybe 1979, maybe 1980. I forgot a little bit the exact date, but I was in my late teen years, and I didn't live with my parents anymore. So it must be like 1979, 1980, and I got in a car accident, and it was a pretty bad car accident. It was in the morning. I always tended to work hard, and I worked long hours, and one day I drove to work. I probably blacked out. We never found out what it is because I had a very bad concussion, and if you have that in a very bad way, it also causes some memory loss. So I had that. I had to go to the hospital, stayed in the hospital for close or a little bit over a month. I even forgot that, but it was around a month, and then I had to recover from that car accident for over half a year before I could taking part of doing just a normal job and going to sports events and stuff like that. So it was a pretty bad car accident. But I tell this that when I got out of the hospital, my parents asked me to live with them for a while so that I could recover a little bit better. And just after 2-3 days, I think, that I came out of the hospital, my dad said, "Hey, let's go for a ride." I said, "Sure, let's go for a ride." And he handed me the car keys, and I said, "Oh no, no, Dad, I'm not going to drive that car." I said, "I just came out of the hospital." I said, "Exactly why I want you to drive that car." He said, "Are you afraid to drive that car?" And he hit me. That hit me actually that I was. And he said, "But you can still drive a car. You know that, right?" I said, "Yeah, I know that I can drive that car because that was what happened so far. I knew that I could drive a car, but I didn't believe it anymore because I was in a very severe car accident. No one knew what happened, so I could easily blame myself for just either not paying attention or just making a huge mistake. I didn't believe myself. That belief in me driving the car had to be restored. So luckily my dad was a wise man. He's still alive, by the way, so he probably still is a wise man. But so he made me drive that car, and in the beginning I was very careful, but very quickly all these reflexes came back, and soon after that I had I had no problems in driving a car at all anymore, but I had to overcome something. Now, I'm telling you this because a car accident is maybe something, maybe not super normal, but it's also, you know, kind of normal, right? It's not so like, super traumatic. It could be, but it wasn't in my case. But if you went through something like I did too, as I wrote in my book Broken Silence, where you are abused by close family members from a very young age on, your view of who you can trust in life is almost gone. You don't know. You don't know the people who you should trust. Those are the ones that you can't trust. So, you know, I didn't believe that you could trust people. I just didn't believe that anymore. So, and on top of that, talking a little bit about my dad, who went through pretty severe situations when he was young, right? Wars, other things. And he developed in himself a deep mistrust of people. And he said to me always, he said, son, he said, you better start off with distrusting people. You can always trust them later, right? So that's what he put it in, not only in my mind, but in most of our siblings' mind. And I actually was, I took that over for a long time. If you combine that with, what I've been through as a child, with my child abuse, that's how I operated in life. I actually was sometimes so rude, I was not even being protective for myself, that if someone talked to me, I would just say in his face, flat out saying, hey, why do you talk to me? I don't trust you. I mean, that's of course really weird, right? That's not a good way of doing it. So trust have something to do with belief, right? At some point in time, you need to take the decision again to believe people, to trust people that they don't do you any harm or don't do anything wrong to you. And very often in life you have to take that decision over and over again, because it is as it is. Life is as it is. At some point in time you will give the trust to someone who didn't deserve it, or who violated that trust, or at least from whom you believe that he or she violated your trust. So you have to take that decision again. And that's often one of the hardest things to do in life, right? Is to trust someone again. Specifically for child abuse victims, is how do you do it again? How do you trust people again after what you have been through? Well, there's never a guarantee. And that is sometimes at least that's what I was looking for in the beginning, when I started to realize I have to trust people again. But then I asked myself, can I get a guarantee? And you don't get a guarantee. And in fact, you never get a guarantee about anything in life. If you besides that life ends at some point in time, that's not a really positive thing to say, but that's probably the only guarantee that you have in life. And it's the same thing. That's why I made that connection. It's the same thing as driving that car. The more experienced you are, you trust your instinct, you have knowledge and skills that you have developed, that you know how to handle dangerous situations, that you know how to react, you know that from yourself, you know how to avoid maybe a certain situation, and it's the same thing in relationship. I don't want to say it's exactly like driving a car, but at some point in time you have to trust yourself and get into that driver's seat again and start trusting people, no matter how hard it is, right? Trust me, after having that car accident, it was incredibly hard. It was only for a moment, maybe a brief moment, but in that moment, I truly had to be coached, right? I didn't have to go to therapy. I had to be coached by someone that I trusted in this situation. It doesn't have to be that I have to trust him in any situation, but in this situation, I trusted my dad, and he said to me, I'm sitting next to you. You can drive that car, right? So, and that is the same thing with relationship. At some point in time, you have to take that risk. Hey, my dad took a risk too. I could easily have made an accident too. He probably would have done the same thing with me again, try to do it again. Right? So, is it always I have to see it before I believe it? Right? Yeah, for a lot of things, maybe that's a wise decision, but for a lot of things, it is a very difficult decision. This Tuesday, which is when I place this on Facebook, will be tomorrow, but if you listen to the podcast, it will be the day after tomorrow. I'm doing a talk about. Actually, that's not true. It will be the day. It will be tomorrow. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit confused with the days. So tomorrow, on Tuesday at 12 o'clock. If you haven't been there, I always do a Facebook Live. That's 12 o'clock Dallas time. That is Central Time here in the U.S. And it is, if you live in the Netherlands, because that's where I'm from, that's why I'm saying it. At 7 o'clock p.m. In the Netherlands. So every week we do the place, and every week we have a more like an inspirational talk, very close to what coaching is about. So come and follow us there, because I will do a slightly different take on believing, and can you believe before you see it, or do you have to see it before you believe it? And the topic there is, if you have a vision, you have to believe it first before other people see it, right? Let me go back to that first to that event where the Wright brothers took their plane into the air. I think it was 1903 or something. They had to see it first before other people could see it, right? So that's the topic of Tuesday, and the impact that has on people's life if you either don't, or if you dare to take that step to do that, right? So that's what we talk about this coming Tuesday in the place. Come visit us there. It would be a pleasure to have you there. You can ask me questions directly. Having said that, this was the podcast Thrive Not Survive with episode 28. This was Jean, and I'll hear you back tomorrow. Bye bye.